I'm doing great. Thanks, Mike, for asking me to join. I'm
Ab-
glad to be here.
Absolutely. We're really excited to have you here on Views for the Ramp. For those of you that are just tuning in to watch, welcome. Glad you could join us. As always, I'm Mike Franks, the Managing Director of Safety and Training here at NATA. Really excited to be joined by Todd Weeber, the Chief Operating Officer at Magellan Jets. I think we've got a great conversation that we're going to have today, but before we get started, always want to do that thing for those of you tuning in. Remember, take a second, pause the video if you need to, and hit that little subscribe button right down there on the bottom so that you'll always get new updates, be able to see the latest edition of Views from the Ramp. But with that, Todd, why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to the audience and talk a little bit about Magellan Jets.
Great, thank you. That's a perfect segue while people are looking for the subscribe button. And I fully endorse that method so that it comes to you via reminders in your inbox. So
Right.
at Magellan Jets, we're a full service charter brokerage house. We provide charter services, charter brokerage services, membership programs, and jet card programs. What makes us a little bit different is we run a safety management system that is on top of a service management system because we collect so much information on the flight from end to end that we have found that service issues are precursors of safety issues. And when we share data with our supply chain, not only do we provide an overall better experience for our clients, but we often wind up providing some illumination to directors of operations and directors of safety on how we can enhance the experience for everybody. So I've been doing this for about 3 years, and I'd just like to start out by thanking you for inviting me and just reminding the entire team that's joining us that it is not lost on us that the most essential, don't tell the pilots or flight attendants this, but the most essential part of the experience is the ground experience and the transfer experience. And it's amazing how someone can be inadvertently flown through a thunderstorm, shaken and baked, and if they're handled properly on the arriving end or the departure end, they invariably tell us they have had an excellent experience. So I'd like to thank everyone who's responsible for that and let you know that our clients recognize that you're on the front lines of safety and service. And oftentimes you're the first people reporting to work after a disaster, after a hurricane, or something that has happened that's impacted your community. And so we thank you for that. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
That's fantastic. It kind of actually knocks out the first question that I wanted to ask you, is about the interplay between the customer and the operator, and then the ground handling and the FBO. I think you did that was a fantastic description of the value that the ground handling team in general plays in ultimate customer satisfaction. But why don't maybe we start off talking a little bit about the market and how it might be changing right now, the client. I know in a recent NATA Air Charter roundtable, you spoke about the changing face of the clientele that you're working with. Can you maybe describe for our viewers a little bit about what you're seeing, what's happening out there?
Sure. So I'll jump to the end for those that don't want to wait, and then I'll work backwards with the numbers. So what I've stated before, and I think is a valid assertion, is that because of circumstance, we've all been reminded, whether it's ground handling, ground transportation, full FBO services, the operators, or even those of us that communicate directly with clients, we have forced to become the best communications companies that we have ever been. And we've all been on the receiving end of a bad handoff of information and the immediate reaction that happens when customers have incorrect information. So what we found is that if we pre-contact everyone and get coordinated on what the expectations are through the entire experience, that the clients are tolerant of slight deviations and often appreciate answers like, I'm not sure, let me check into that and get right back to you with the facts, rather than I'm waiting on information from the operator, I'm waiting on information from the FBO, or, oh, that's a surprise to me. And this group of clients that is coming our way, wave after wave, since the crisis began, there's a lot of them. There's a study by McKinsey and Company that's just about 60 days old. It's published in May, that claims that there are somewhere between 900,000 and 1.4 million
Wow.
principal spenders of transportation that used to fly on the airlines, but now are taking a pause from airline flying. And that seems like staggering numbers until you look at the drop off in demand in both business-oriented flying and commercial traffic, and it starts to make sense. What we did recently on the roundtable was we talked about a sample of our new clients, the last 200 of them. Because of the information that they share with us and we collect on them, we can speak in generalities and share with the entire team that about a third of the people coming into our systems, and that means your systems, are self-identifying as at risk, and they expect us to take the COVID crisis seriously and act as an extension of their own protective attitude because they've got some kind of issue that they're not willing to subject to the limitations of commercial air travel. As a quick aside, IATA, Delta Airlines, Southwest Airlines, there is no doubt in our mind that many of the commercial airlines are doing everything they can. So is the TSA to make the airline experience as safe as possible. But the weak link is personal responsibility. You could take over-the-counter medication and pass a temperature test. You could lie on one of the forms and still be on board spreading the disease. Private aviation, business aviation, really is the only transportation system where the numbers are small enough that we can almost completely guarantee safety. So these at-risk people that come to us, they say, we're here to stay, provided you can assure us that the operators and the FBOs are performing to a certain standard. A third of the people are also corporate travelers who are elevating their level of corporate responsibility. Okay. Meaning that they approach their board of directors and say that our key managers, our key personnel out in the field doing assessments and keeping operations going, as well as our executives, we can't have them out for 4 to 6 weeks because they've contracted COVID. So for the foreseeable future, they'll have to fly in our mutual system. And then a third of these folks are opportunistic. They're seeing individual companies dump some availability on the marketplace. They're seeing some ridiculously low one-way pricing. So if you subtract out the opportunistic folks, there's about 850,000 sustainable customers that if we just get on the same page about what it is they want and how we can fulfill that, this could be an economic oasis, business aviation, and the associated services where we can do two things. We can fulfill our promise to industry and to society to be essential service, a safe lifeline, a way to provide personal business transportation like nobody else can. But we can also provide a complete assurance to people that are risk averse that this is the way to travel. And we believe they're going to stay with us for life because we're confident we're going to solve the COVID-19 pandemic at some point, but there will probably be something else for that at-risk population within a few months. And they've already communicated to us, life is too short to mess around. They intend to stay with us.
So as you gather this information from your clients and you're seeing what's going on out there in the industry, are you seeing the kind of response that facilitates the actions you all are taking from ground handlers, from FBOs? Are they taking the issues as seriously and kind of the fundamental understanding of where the market lies, like you all are seeing?
Well, there's a clear haves and have-nots. Okay. And what the haves have is they have information and some kind of training framework. So you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to talk about the Safety First Clean standard and how there's 125 FBOs plus on board with this concept. And it's more than just something you put on LinkedIn or you put on your website. It's instant credibility, and it's an instant framework of training. So what we've said to some of our colleagues in the operations business is that getting used to people's expectations around personal protective equipment by one example and social distancing by another example is it's really no different than how far we've come with smoking. So there probably was a time shortly after World War II where it was okay to drive a fuel truck with a cigarette hanging out of your mouth and maybe even pump gas that way.
At some point.
At some point. But we've come so far since then that that would be grounds for an unpleasant experience for the person choosing to smoke, right
Yes,
now.
it would. That's right.
So here we are with COVID. There are people that, and what's behind that? What is behind all of these smoking rules, whether it's restaurants or parks or while driving a fuel truck? It's just science. You're driving around flammables. You have secondary smoke that's been proven time and again to be dangerous. Well, there's enough evidence that these two at-risk populations, the ones protecting their business from sustainability issues, the people protecting themselves, that approaching them without PPE is the equivalent of approaching them with a cigar hanging out of your mouth in an aviation operation, or being a captain of an airplane that leads a discussion by saying, did you know that gravity is just a conspiracy and we don't really need to upload as much fuel as the paperwork says so. So it's interesting that we've encountered organizations that don't have the right information, a standard like you provide through Safety First, a context, meaning the customer context. And so the feedback we get is that even though we may call ahead and conduct a form of pre-audit, does your FBO have PPE? Will you do social distancing? Will you handle luggage with gloves, or will you adhere to a client's request to let them handle their own luggage? The answer is always yes, but if it's a high volume location that doesn't really believe in maintaining a standard, the chances that they're going to come out and remember that it was your tail number that requires this handling is low. And we've gotten some very negative feedback from clients who are at risk. Oh, very negative. I shared with you on our last call, we have a quote, a dissatisfied customer quote of the month, because perfection is a very difficult business, right? Even for us perfectionists. And in July, it was, I may as well have flown commercial. The handling of my equipment and the social distance violations were disgraceful. And when we called it was on both the operator and the FBO, and we called them both. They apologized profusely and said, certainly we can understand. So we consider this to be a journey. The people running the ledgers at the operators and the people running the ledgers at the FBOs fully understand that there are 5 forces of flight, right? Everyone knows that the airplanes move by thrust to overcome drag and lift, overcome gravity, but nothing moves without the revenue, without the dollars. So our core message today to the community is, what if I told you that there's up to 850,000 new sustainable customers to help make our organizations go, and all we need to do is set aside the noise around COVID-19 and how to fight it, and fight it in the way that they want it to be fought, with just 3 basic things: the social distancing, the hygiene, and the wearing of PPE as appropriate.
That is I think a discussion point. Your way of framing that is something that maybe has been missing. The positive message that you're bringing right now to FBOs, to aircraft operators, is that not, wow, this is a tough time that we're all trying to get through, but rather there's a distinct opportunity here. And to do that, we have to focus on the expectations and the needs of the client. So that's a really great way of looking at this and understanding, because it's not just a theory, as you point to. You've got numbers, you've got research that kind of backs that up. So as a ground handler in an FBO, you talk about the PPE, social distancing. What as an FBO, how do I, aside from the Safety First Clean standard, how would I improve the communication between myself and aircraft operators? Do you have any insight as to where you guys see breakdowns occurring? What actions can you see ground handlers taking that can facilitate meeting those client expectations?
Well, that's a really fun question, because if we're talking about communications that are designed to overcome all the various circumstances that we might find, In our businesses, there is no perfect system. So we've got to plan for the outliers and trust that our people that we work with will do the right thing in the absence of specific training. So that almost sounds like a message of hopelessness, like it is what it is. That's absolutely the farthest from the truth. It is what our mindset is. So if everyone involved in our businesses understands that it's not just a motivational speech, this is the time in your life when you are going to make a huge difference in other people's lives. Like what happens on the ground directly impacts what is happening in our system. And our system is a backbone during a national and international time of crisis. It doesn't feel like it because the enemy is invisible and we've created such an absurdly high standard of living that the level of pain for people in our industry, it's extremely painful, but it's not yet humanitarian painful. So if you start each day with that mindset that today is the day that I'm going to make a difference, and you slow down and empathize, it is fair to estimate that everyone coming and going from the aircraft is going to be experiencing some level of anxiousness that they did not experience pre-crisis. It is fair to say that the majority of operators, airlines and operators alike, I said majority, so there are some exceptions, meet the FAA inspector's definition of distressed. And financial distress permeates the entire organization. We just mentally go faster than we normally like to. We make snap decisions. We rely on heuristics. Fortunately for all of us here, we've got enough of a training background that we can just slow down and empathize and say, all right, if I'm the crew, what do I need to know? You already know, I don't need to answer it for you. If I'm the passengers, what do I need to know and see? And the answers are very simple: comfort and confidence. They want to be confident that the people that are receiving them know what they're doing, have some idea of who they are without having too much of an idea of who they are. And they want to be comforted. So if there's a delay in ground transportation, they need communication, they need updates. If there's someone who is at risk, don't assume that they know that where you're placing them in the FBO is safe. You might want to up your communications and say, this is a safe place. It was sanitized before you're seated here. I can bring you something if you like. And then when you bring them things, present them to someone as though they are safe. Don't just hand them a cup of coffee, but bring them a cup of coffee on a tray. So the little empathetic details that flow from that we are experiencing a national crisis and I can make a difference mindset will come so naturally after just a couple days. But absent that mindset, it could just feel like just another day on the job. Volume is lower than it has been. It's coming in fits and starts across the country. So if you're used to a certain pace and then you've got to suddenly work at a higher pace, it's easier to forget those details. So really, really simple to achieve all those great things. Slow down at the beginning of the shift, reset your mindset, because this is, it seems like an exaggeration to say that these are the roles that are heroic roles, but they really, really are. You cannot achieve this level of safety on the commercial airlines. I don't think you can even achieve this level of safety in a full tempo military operation, because the mission comes first. But if the mission at the FBO is to take care of myself, my fellow crewmates, the crews, and the passengers, the heroics will take care of themselves, one little event at a time.
Again, another outstanding way to look at this. I know in years of talking to ground handlers, FBOs, from frontline employees to line service, I mean, there is a level of pride, I think, that comes from providing great service and understanding what service means now during this pandemic and what it may be, for the foreseeable future or even farther. And understanding, I think your message will go a long way to helping teams and employees, individuals, and even companies begin to understand that there is a new dynamic or new side to service that needs to be understood. It's a cultural evolution now. What you said about understanding that this is the way we operate. We talk about that in safety, obviously, all the time, and understanding that the culture and the beliefs and the activities that an FBO undertakes are what builds safety, and the same thing applies on the service side. So that's good. So a couple more questions. I don't want to keep you all day. I know you're busy, and but looking from pivot just a bit for a moment and talk about safety. How do you all approach safety when it comes to ground handling? Is that something? How are you looking at it? How are you talking about it beyond just the COVID, but in the aircraft safety, ground handling, passenger safety, moving beyond COVID?
So we audit on a number of factors,
Okay.
actively and passively. So the facility needs to meet the aircraft. It's a combination of operating hours, staffing levels during those operating hours, and then feedback from both the crews and the passengers. So there are, I think I mentioned it already, there are leading indicators in the service metric arena that reveal potential problems with safety. And I'll give you a common KPI that doesn't seem like a KPI, but to our audience, it will resonate. If your staffing levels are such that the people running the ramp have to move with undue speed, in other words, if they seem rushed or hurried, and the result is an aircraft has got to wait to be parked, we've got to wait to get on the van or the ground transportation because we've got to wait for luggage handling because our ratio of colleagues working the ramp to work being done is inappropriate, that is an indication that there might be something temporarily or permanently wrong with the safety culture. And so if you keep the data and you add it up over time, and at this FBO, they're always rushed, they're always leaving bags on the airplane, they're always making the passengers wait, and then across the field, it feels like an effortless experience because there's one person in the van, there's one person assigned to verifying that the baggage compartment is clear, there's one person assigned to guiding the passengers and make sure that everybody has what they need before they move on. That starts to show up. And then when you peel the layers back further, you find out that the latter FBO has got a training framework where everyone speaks the same language. Just vocabulary alone can tell you. And then further, when you peel back, you find that the FBO is appropriately owned and funded and not an ancillary secondary business. So the characteristics that we look for service-wise is that the FBO is the primary business, that it's well-funded, that we can point to a training program, and that their service metrics are outstanding. And that is one layer of our layered approach to service that we refer to as the ground transfer experience.
And that, when you say it would resonate with those that are viewing, I can tell you it absolutely does. The number of workshops and training sessions that we do at NATA, often we do roundtable discussions on safety, and the staffing level and feeling like people are rushing and trying to provide, we want to provide great service, always ties back to safety when we talk about what's the number one safety concern. So that makes perfect sense. So to kind of begin to wrap us up here today, what's the viewpoint going forward? We've looked at where we are now, we've looked at the market and where the new clients are and where they're coming from. How far out do you see this going? Is this a 6-month issue? Is this a 12-month issue? Where do we stand from a time frame perspective with COVID?
Wow. Beware all forecasters.
Right.
Beware all forecasters, because if we can dabble in science for a second, I suppose the same people that are resistant to measures to prevent the spread of a pandemic will also be resistant to measures like vaccines to end the pandemic. So take whatever economic forecasts are getting people through the news cycle on when this is going to be over and just add a year to it. It's going to be a long, long, long time. And one of our problems is that the current news cycle in our industry is already talking about how manufacturing is being permanently affected. So even if there was something that pulled us out of this rapidly, some kind of reverse black swan, we can't just turn the factories back on and get everybody back to work. So there'll be just an equal amount of peril if there's some kind of rapid recovery. So the two things that we can do to succeed will both equal the same thing. We want to fulfill our commitment as an industry to being a backbone of the country, and indeed an unsung hero of society at large. It is true, and now it's showtime. We got to prove it. The two ways that we can prove it is we can make a commitment to communicate as good as we possibly can as human beings with a bend towards empathy. So if you are working at an understaffed FBO, it's all about the art of the apology. The van will be ready in this number of minutes because these are the things I have to do first. And then you proceed at a safe pace to do your job. The second thing that we can do to follow through on our commitment is make these behaviors, the masking, the gloving, the social distancing, the cleaning after every flight, not just when the magic coating gets sprayed on the inside of the airplane every 90 days, but after every flight. These are our expected behaviors and uniform probably for the foreseeable future.
Right.
It will not take long after COVID-19. Mother Nature is incredibly smart. There will be something else challenging our at-risk populations, and we'll be gathered here once again talking about how business aviation is the safest, most sustainable solution to move people around, and we're gonna have to do it all over again. So the sooner we can adopt these behaviors and uniform elements as muscle memory, the faster will be the go-to element for the broader public at large. Oh, if I had a chance, I would make my personal transportation via business aviation because they've got a proven track record of the appropriate behavior.
Well, I think that's a perfect spot to wrap up, Todd. You know, the making this a part of who we are and recognizing that the value business aviation, general aviation, FBOs, aircraft operators provide to the traveling public, be it business or personal travel. This is the time to be a hero, to realize that we play a vital role that no one else can. So really appreciate your time today to help us understand it. I think we've got some great things. I think our audience is going to enjoy hearing, enjoy listening to our conversation. And just again, want to thank you. Anything else you want to add before we kind of wrap up today, though?
I just appreciate the time. And it's really important for our audience to understand that it's recognized by the customers and by the people that act on behalf of the customers that what they do is hard. What the NATA membership does is extremely difficult. If it were easy, anyone would do it. So we're already talking to a special subset of human being that is capable of doing these outstanding things. And the circumstances of the emergency has not made it any easier. But we are completely confident, and this is why it's worth the time to spend time with this group. We are completely confident that this is the group that is going to answer the call and make the difference and help get this entire country back to work. So thank you for your time, and we're happy to help whenever needed.
Outstanding. Thank you, Todd, and thank you to everyone for joining this edition of Views from the Ramp. Mike France, and look forward to seeing you next time, and hope everyone has a fantastic day.